Hello again, it's Noob, and this unassuming looking padlock might just contain a truly unpickable lock, which was kindly lent to me by Pugh, who was the designer and engineer of this lock. And I met Andy at LockCon in the Netherlands, and I borrowed this from him there, so pretty cool. So what do I mean by unpickable? Well, let's show the normal operation of the lock. It's really nothing special. Here's a little 5-pin key. There's a very standard looking Euro cylinder with a what looks like a slightly smaller core in there. And does it work? Yeah, it works just like you'd expect a standard lock to work. So we should be able to pick it normally, right? Well, let's try that out. So let's see what happens when we try to pick this lock. I've got a nice slender lock pick, something which I would normally use for a keyway this small, and a turning tool. So pop the turning tool in, we'll apply a little bit of pressure on it, and we'll try to find any pins which feel like they're binding. So anything on 5, no. 4, 3, 2, oh, I just hit 2 and it looked like it opened. Just have a look at that keyway, look at the lean on that. But the pins inside now feel dead. There's no feedback whatsoever. I'm going through and I can't really feel anything, it just feels like they're solid. So, okay, let's try raking. So I've got a nice small rake, just a little worm rake, and we'll try raking this lock, see if we can get an open through raking. Oh, and again, we got that partial open, but nothing happening. Those of you who watch my channel may be thinking, this appears to be working in a very similar way to the last unpickable lock, the Enclave that I got sent. And if you were thinking that, you are mostly right. This is based on a very similar principle to the Enclave. The way that this is stopping you picking the lock is by providing multiple false shear lines. What do I mean by that? Well, the shear line is the line which is reached when all of the key pins are pushed to the right height by the key, allowing the lock to turn, essentially pushing those driver pins out of the way. You'll see the shear line form as I put the key in, and there we go. You can see the shear line here at the top of the plug. Now we can open the lock. A lock like this only has one possible true shear line. In fact, it only has one shear line full stop. This lock, in comparison, has potentially thousands of different shear lines, but only one of them allows the lock to be opened. Let's have a look on the inside and see what's going on. This video was actually kindly sent to me by Andy for the purposes of this video. So when we see the video of how this lock is assembled, you'll see that there's a groove cut on the inside of the body of this lock, which allows a sleeve to slide in over the core from the inside. Let's have a look at that from the cutaway view and you'll see exactly what I mean. So when you insert the plug in the center, you can push a sleeve down over that plug in the groove which is cut on the inside of the lock body. That provides multiple shear lines. The pins themselves have lots and lots and lots of little wafers in to provide multiple shear lines, and a very thick wafer which must be aligned with that inner sleeve. You'll see the lock open now. There we go. So what's actually happening when I'm picking or raking this lock and I can't do it? Well, when picking, only the inner cylinder can be tensioned, just like a normal lock. And all of those wafers feel like they could be the real shear line. So you set them to what you think is right, the inner core will turn, but that is it. Unless you get all of the wafer stacks to the right height, it will not open. Now we'll take this apart to show you properly what's on the inside of this lock. But before I do, I was thinking about how I could possibly go about picking this lock. Now, I don't think single pin picking is going to work. Those little wafers really feel like you are reaching a true shear line, that you're setting those pins. And I can't personally tell the difference through feel whether I'm at a true shear line or a false shear line. There are just too many options. But I thought, well, raking could work. And I was thinking about a set of rakes like this. These rakes offer up a different spacing in terms of the peaks and troughs on these rakes. So you can see here how those differ. Why is that important? Well, the idea with these is that you can closely try to replicate a key bitting. Let's have a look at this one, for example. So if I align this pick here to this key, you can see how this peak of the pick might be able to reach up to the pin height necessary to set pin 5. Pins 4 and 3 could be set by the shank here, and 2 and 1 might be able to be set by the second peak of the lockpick. It looks plausible. Let's give it a go and see if it works. In this scenario, I'll have worked my way through my set of rakes, trying each one in turn a few times to see if it opens the lock. I finally got to the last one. As we know, this seems to replicate the key pretty closely, and in a low security lock, this almost certainly should get an open. So this is slightly different to random. You're using a set of rakes and you're going through them logically to see if you can get an open. Now already I've got a false open, so I'm just going to pop this lockpick in again and give it a jiggle and see if I can't try to rake. No, again I've gone into that, what we would say, a false set. It's not truly open. I'll try one more time. And no, we just keep falling into this false set. And I tried this off camera quite a few times. And the reason why it doesn't work is I think it's because the little wafers which are in here are so thin that even though this is very close in approximation to that key bitting, even if it's out by a certain amount, say for example I'm overlifting pin 4 here by maybe 0.5 millimeter, that would be enough to push a wafer past its true shear line and put it into a false shear line. So I think what's happening here is that the wafers are so thin and the tolerance is so good that even with a rake which is replicating the key pretty closely, we're still not able to get an open. So let's actually take this apart. I feel that a video can only go so far. It's always good to actually see how a lock is put together so that we can really appreciate the engineering and the design behind this. To minimize losing anything important, I'm going to be using a pinning mat to catch anything that may bounce, and we'll start by taking the core out of the lock, which is in the shape of a half Euro cylinder. So to take this lock apart, we have to slide this very nicely dovetailed section out like this. And we can see that there is a small grub screw holding on the face plate of this lock. Now, Andy's told me that, of course, this is a prototype, and if fully machined, then this would be secured to the front of the lock instead. So just bear in mind that this isn't a full production version. It's to demonstrate how the lock works. So I've got to be very careful in tipping out the pin stacks to make sure I've got everything correct, because there's a lot of little wafers and things in here, and I want to get that all right. So first up is the driver pin, and a spacer. It looks like a spacer and a little driver pin. Oh no, that's a stack of wafers there. And it looks like there's more wafers to come, and they are very thin. Wow. And looks like there's the little key pin there as well. I imagine the driver pin is so long because there's actually quite a long way to go in terms of getting to the inner core in this lock. So there you go. That is all of the pin chambers empty, and I can withdraw this whole bar until we get to this detent at the back. Now this helps center the plug so it doesn't flop around. See, there's a little pin or something in there. Probably is. Let me just tap that out. That'll keep everything nice and secure. And we're almost at the point where we can start to disassemble this part of the mechanism. So this is a screw in the cam piece. We can almost remove the plug, but we have to, I think, remove this front plate first. And that should just slide off like that and allow us to, so beautifully engineered, allow us to just slide out the inner plug. Isn't that cool? And this is really, genuinely just a normal lock plug. And it's held in, so you can see here you've got this whole sleeve here, that inner sleeve there, and the inner plug, and there is a little circlip there that we can remove. I don't think that's entirely necessary, but I might do it anyway. There we go. And you see that that plug will literally just slide out. So this is an inner plug with the key pins, and that is the first shear line. Then you've got this outer here. So there you go. You can see that inner plug in the first sleeve of the core here. With a little bit of wriggling, we can, remove the outer sleeve. There you go, showing the Bible, which is where the driver pins sit, and this cam piece, which is very cool. Let's pop that down there. This bar that fell out is actually a very clever piece. It sits in here and it allows a certain degree of rotation of the inner plug. So if we reach a fake shear line, you'll see that we can actually turn to a few degrees of freedom between here and here. So you can see that I am moving the lock a little bit, but I'm not getting the open. You have to turn this whole outer section to open the lock. Just moving the inner bit won't work. This outer sleeve here is exactly the same thickness as these big wafers here, as you can see, which is very, very clever. So you have to not only get the driver pins to the correct shear line, which would be here, but you also have to get the big wafers on each pin stack to sit exactly between the sort of middle sleeve and the outer sleeve for the whole thing to operate and to turn. It's very, very well thought out. Let's have a look at those stacks of pins here. We'll have a look at those cores in a minute. But you'll see that we have the key pins, stacks of wafers, and they are very, very thin, as I suggested they might be earlier. Let's have a look. Just look how thin that is. About, I would say, maybe a quarter of a millimeter, something like that. It's very, very, very thin, and explains why a close approximation to the key bitting on a rake just won't work. Unless it's almost exact, you're not going to get an open through raking. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's extremely unlikely. If we look at a small pin stack, so we've got a short key pin, and that means you only have 2 wafers in this stack and the thick wafer. But in a bigger key pin, where you need more height here, you actually have let me see, 4 or 1, 2, 3, 4 wafers and the thick wafer there, so 4 thin and 1 thick. And each stack has a certain amount. I think this one has 3, this one has 4, this one has 5 of those thin wafers. So you can imagine if you have an average of 4 or so wafers per pin stack, it's 4 to the power 5, plus I guess the thick wafers as well, plus the shear line, the true shear line. So maybe that's actually 5 to the power 6 different combinations, and somebody who does better maths than me will be able to work that out, how many combinations there are to be able to get this lock open in terms of possible shear lines. So it's pretty impressive, really. And let's just have a look at that triple sleeve there. So you have the inner there, we have the center, and we have the outer. And as we saw in that video, all of the key pins and wafers have to be lifted to the correct heights on each of these shear lines to open up the lock. So cool. So there we are, a coaxial unpickable lock from Andy Pugh. Really, I'm so interested to know what you think to this in the comments. I personally think it's really beautiful engineering, and what I like the most about this is that it's already in a format which you can see is usable in standard lock bodies like this, which I think is super important. I'm so grateful for Andy for lending this to me. It's super fun to play with. I hope you liked it. If you did leave a like. If you have a comment, again, leave them below. I read them all. I'll reply to as many as I can. If you haven't subscribed and want to see more content like this, please subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.